Hello and welcome back. Today I want to talk about Plex terminology. So many of you have been told by a friend, by a relative or someone, maybe even me, to buy a Plex media server. Not just a Plex media server, but get hold of a NAS to host Plex media server. Because straight away I've already tripped over one of the many terminology problems about getting a Plex media server for the first time, and you don't really know the language, and it's so easy to get baffled and overwhelmed by so many of the different parts of this whole purchase. Now, it's worth mentioning today's video is about terminology. Now, by the end of this video, you will understand most of the key components in purchasing your first Plex media server NAS. I apologise if I talk a bit fast at times. You might want to watch this video a couple of times just to make sure you've covered everything. But before we forget anything else, it's worth bearing in mind to remember that Plex is the software, NAS is the hardware, and as long as you hold on to those two concepts, you should be absolutely fine. Because too many people wonder, one, is Plex, am I buying a Plex NAS? So many of you watch my April Fool's video to know that I highlighted that there is no official Plex NAS. Plex is just a software that needs to be installed on different devices, and the NAS is what you need to run Plex. But different NASs that you buy will support and play your media in Plex in different ways. And what you need to know is all of the points in today's video, so that means you've got all the education and the knowledge, and hopefully this video will be knocked out in 10 to 15 minutes, let me know how I'm doing at the bottom, to know all of the buzzwords and the things that you need to focus on reams and sheet after sheet of specifications that you can narrow it down. So throughout this video, I am going to look at my list just off camera, so I do apologise if I keep looking down like that. There isn't like a problem or a fire, there's just my list of notes. I could have gone tablet-wide for this video, but I decided not to keep it nice and easy. So, first and foremost, Plex. What is Plex? That's our first question. Plex is a media app. It's sort of splintered off of something called XBMC, that we'll talk about later in the video. And Plex is a multimedia platform that's pretty much largely designed in caveman speak to give you all of the features, functionality and ease of use that you're getting from things like Netflix and Amazon Instant and iPlayer and stuff like that, and gives you all of that user interface and all of the ease of accessing and streaming all of those media files. But instead of paying a monthly fee and only having access to the movies and TV and box sets they offer you, it allows you to use your media, your purchases, your decades of purchasing digital TVs and all those digital versions that you arrived when you bought your DVD or Blu-ray. It allows you to watch your media, but with that glossy style user interface and ease and internet access and world access. That's what Plex is. Moving on from that, what is a NAS? That's the second question. A NAS is a network attached storage drive. So if you've ever used like a USB disk, a little USB drive, or an external drive or anything like that, or even a computer with a hard drive, that is a local drive. It's all the data that you can interact and read and write onto locally, connected via USB or SATA inside a hard drive, inside a computer or laptop. A NAS is an area of storage that's accessible over the network or the internet. It is network accessed storage, network attached storage, no less. And it allows you to interact with an area of data either over the network, so in caveman speak, that's everyone in your sharing the same internet, or anywhere in the world via outside access. And of course there are security credentials in between to allow to stop interlopers getting into your data. That's what a NAS is in its basic form. What you need is Plex, the software, and install it on the NAS. It's very, very easy and it's free, and they've all got app centers that allow you to install Plex in like 3 clicks. So those are the two main concepts. Let's break it down to the things about Plex that are the most important, and the terminology you're going to hear time and time and time again. Next, let's talk about that XBMC that I talked about earlier. XBMC was a media project that allowed you to basically watch and interact and enjoy your media. It's completely free, and it refers to that kind of cross access area of enjoying your media. XBMC in its truest form, in my opinion, is still very much alive in something like Kodi, K-O-D-I, which is kind of more localized in its access to media, and you can install that on many NASs unofficially too. But The team behind XMBC eventually, in different team members, became and created different software off the back of it. There's things like MB, things like Kodi, and Plex. Plex is a far more internet-focused means to access your data. Network too, but predominantly internet accessible, and that's what XMBC is, a means to interact with your media and enjoy your media on all your other devices, but how you want to interact with it will change depending on the software. And that's why Plex is probably the most popular for most users that want to use their mobile phones or their tablets while they're on holiday or at work or on the commute. That's why it's so popular. Next, a Plex pass. You may have been urged or noticed that although Plex is free, there's also an urge to go, hey, why don't you go for the paid service, the Plex Pass subscription? Now, the Plex Pass subscription, I think, is about 5 or 10 quid a month. There's also a lifetime version, and you can do monthly or a yearly annual subscription. And it gives you access to bunches of services and add-ons and packages and software stuff and recording live TV and sports events and communication and different family members and different servers. And basically, it is the base package plus. You pay for that extra usage. What that means is Plex ends up being free to people that want to use it very, very casually, but for the people that want to use it a lot, and are going to rely on it a lot, they are the ones that kind of subsidize the whole of Plex, and that's why the Plex Pass exists. Plex Pass is going to be mentioned a few more times in this video because there are certain features and functionality that you can't use in the free version that you can only get in a Plex Pass. So it's good, it will be good and useful to you to know that the version of Plex that you go for has support for the things that you need. So it might be that you've got no choice but to go Plex Pass because some part of the functionality of Plex is what you desperately need more than anything. Next, we can talk about a host device. And not just a host, we can talk about a host and a client, because these are two words that are thrown around a lot in IT. And now, because of things like Plex, lots of people are being told, oh, are you using a client or a host? And they're kind of, what the hell are you talking about? All it means is the host is the primary. The host is what you're is doing all the work, it's doing the control. And in Plex, the NAS is the host. That is the device that is doing all of the work. It has all of the data. It is deciding on interactions. It is controlling what is doing something. It is the host. It is the overseer. It is the control, the president, the PM. It is the Don. It's the boss. It is the host. Now, connected with that are the clients. Now, if you were to use a party, for example, if you're hosting a party in your home, you are the host, aren't you? You're hosting the party. So you've got all of the canapes, the dips, the music, the games, and all that stuff. I don't go to good parties. You've got all of that stuff. You are the host. You are the NAS. You are Plex. You invite people into your home to eat the delicacies, to drink the drink, to watch the show, to enjoy the music. They are the clients. And in Plex, the client is your mobile phone, it's your tablet, it's your console, it's your TV. These are the devices that are accessing the NAS and taking the media to enjoy. So when you hear client and host, know that the client is always where the Plex media server lives, all the data, and the host is that. The client are the people accessing the device. They're the ones accessing the content, and generally the device you're going to be enjoying the media on. So whenever you're watching the media on, congratulations, that's the client. There are rare exceptions where they are one and the same, but that is applicable to like 1% of people that have Plex on a PC and then they're watching it on the same thing. That doesn't really apply here, but that's the general logic between hosts and clients. Next, we can talk about transcoding. This is a big one that we're going to have to break down into several parts. Transcoding in its truest form has been called many things in the past. Encoding, file formatting, and different kind of re-encoding, decoding, all these different words. What we can break it down to, transcoding is when you take a media file that maybe you've got on your NAS that's 4K at 60 frames per second, some mental crazy file, and you need to change it to be more receptive to an older or smaller or more portable device. Maybe it's an old iPhone or an Android or a Samsung or something. Maybe it's an old tablet. Maybe it is you're on a metadata connection or you've got a weak internet connection, but one way or another you're trying to watch a file over there that's on your NAS on the other side of the world or at home and you're on the bus. You're trying to use the internet to access that file, but that file is massive, you know. It's frigging Avatar, original movie adaptation, 4K, massive. And this file is just too big for your little mobile phone. So what transcoding does is it alters that file. It might change it to a file format like FLV or AVI that's more receptive to older devices, or it changes the resolution. So instead of being 4K, it does it down to like 480p or 360p. Have you ever used YouTube or watching it now? Hello. And you've gone to the top where those three buttons are, and you can change the output from 1080p to 720p to 360p to 144p and such. That is what transcoding is, to change and manipulate that file to a smaller version. And transcoding is very, very important to Plex in terms of that worldwide access, because there's not always going to be times where you've got a perfect interaction between the host and the client device. But transcoding is actually broken down into many, many different parts. And just because you read the word transcoding doesn't mean you just quickly click buy, basket buy. Don't. Watch the video to the end. Next, after transcoding, we can talk about transcoding engines. Now, transcoding engines, this is a word that's thrown around. It's a real fancy way. Anyone that's ever bought a laptop in the last 15 years may have heard the term embedded graphics. These are one and the same in the grand scheme of things. Transcoding engines are when a NAS which has a CPU that's so many cores and gigahertz per second and all that larp. Even though it's got all of that stuff, that raw power is suited to processing power. It's called a processor for a reason. It processes data. But a graphical embedded component, or like a graphics card, or a transcoding engine in this case, is a portion of a processor that is designed primarily for manipulating graphics, polygons, visuals, images. It is designed to work and be better at dealing with graphics. So if you have a NAS that has a CPU that has, they can call it embedded graphics, transcoding engine, graphical support, whatever they call it, what that means is that if you need to do something that requires graphical manipulation, like transcoding with that resizing, that area of the CPU will do a better job. And what that means is, instead of the CPU having to work 3 times harder to do a job it's not designed for, because you've got to get the right tool for the job, it will hand the task over to the graphical embedding component, and maybe even assist that if that gets maximized. But the result is less CPU being utilized and better performance overall. And that's pretty much what that is in terms of transcoding engines and embedded graphics. Now, the CPU transcoding engine is available in a number, read my little list, is available on different kinds of CPU. So you may have heard when buying a Plex NAS that they say, oh, you better get a transcoding one. Make sure you get an x86 chip or a 64-bit chip or all of this stuff. And it gets incredibly confusing again. So let's really break it down to caveman. Let's focus on the main two, ARM and x86 processors. An ARM is a CPU that is predominantly found inside devices that are going to be on for a long length of time, that need to use less power because you're on a finite battery while you're portable like a phone or a tablet. But on top of that, can't generate too much heat. It has to give tremendous performance with little consumption to stop heat and damage to the device. These are ARM chips, and although some ARM chips support transcoding, they are crap for Plex. So ARM chips, that's why people tell you to avoid ARM processors, because although you can run Plex on them, because they don't have that transcoding engine option that's accessible to Plex, they are not suitable in the grand scheme of things and will not give you the performance you need for Plex. Which brings us to x86 processors, which are far more proficient, powerful, and have better instructions when handed to them for processing instructions. You know, I want my computer to do X, Y, Z. And normally, almost all of these processors have some form of graphical embedding or a transcoding engine. Although there are, of course, exceptions like Xeon CPUs that do not have a transcoding engine, which are raw power. They can still transcode, but they do it in another way that we'll talk about later in the video. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when you look at these processors, if you're buying a NAS for Plex, transcoding is going to happen sooner or later. So if you're going to buy a NAS for Plex, go for an x86 chip, like a Celeron, a modern Celeron, Intel, some of those Ryzen, not the Ryzen, some of those don't have that. Some of the Intel AMD Radeon CPUs have got it as well. Look out for those. And just because some of the more modern ARM CPUs say they support transcoding, they will not let you use it in Plex. I could bore you with this whole business of compression techniques, and I'm not going to, but basically, go for an x86 chip, okay? Look for it, 64-bit x86 chip. Moving on from that, we can go into the difference between Plex transcoding and native transcoding. This is very, very important for a number of you who have made this mistake to your peril. So once again, just because you read the word transcoding on the NAS side doesn't mean it transcodes on the Plex side. Software, hardware, remember that. Now, Plex transcoding in its truest form is when the Plex media server asks the NAS during accessing a file, I want that file, but I want it reshaped to this. And then the NAS will either effectively say yes or no. How embarrassing. And long story short, Plex transcoding is not the same as native transcoding. Native transcoding is when the app on the NAS, generally made by the NAS brand, say Synology, so Synology's app video station will ask the Synology NAS, so first party app to first party NAS, transcode this file, in which case the NAS will go, yep, absolutely, three bags full, sir, and will manipulate that file as best as it can with its transcoding engine. Because Plex is a third party app, there isn't a guarantee that when it asks the NAS that it will perform and do that job. Not only will it maybe not let Plex access the transcoding engine, but it might say, well, I can transcode, but I'll need to use raw CPU power instead of this graphical component that I know is there, but I can't use it because you're Plex. Now that leads us into software transcoding and hardware transcoding. Okay, software transcoding is as I just described. That is when for Plex, Plex will say, please transcode this file, and even if you have a transcoding engine, or if you don't, the CPU will use its raw power to adapt that file and transcode it for Plex. The problem is software transcoding is not efficient at all. It is asking the NAS to work damn hard, that CPU, to use its raw power to do a job that it's not designed for, to give you that file. The result is that software transcoding utilizes a ridiculous amount of CPU power in practice. Hardware transcoding in Plex is when Plex asks the NAS transcode this file, and not only will the NAS transcode it, but it will give Plex access to the transcoding engine. That is Plex hardware transcoding. That's the difference between Plex software transcoding and Plex hardware transcoding, which leads us into the Plex pass again. Because if you do want to access Plex hardware transcoding, in most cases where the NAS has the functionality, such as the DS918 Plus, for example, in that scenario, you still have to have a Plex pass to enable the option to have hardware transcoding. There'll be a little option, it's so like go to your server settings on the options there, and then lower down it will say encode options, and then you can enable it and go down to something that says make my CPU hurt. It's a bit Duke Nukem, that, isn't it? But it basically says make the CPU do its job, and then it will it will get the NAS to use its transcoding engine. But unfortunately, this isn't an option that's fully supported by all NAS brands and those CPUs. So the same CPU can be on different NAS devices, but sometimes when you enable that option, Plex will ask the NAS, like in the case of the 918 Plus, and the 918 will go, yep, certainly, use my transcoding engine, and then it will make the file for Plex. But in cases like the early QNAPs had the same CPU, or the TerraMaster, you will put that, make my CPU hurt, and Plex will ask for the transcoding to happen, and the QNAP or the TerraMaster won't let Plex use the transcoding engine. It won't give permission to that instruction. So even though you've selected the same settings on the Plex NAS user interface, the back end, whether it's using hardware or software transcoding, is decided by the NAS, and chances are you won't even know which one it is unless you go into the resource monitor and see how much CPU is being utilized. So do make sure you check that in advance. I have got articles that list the actual transcoding support and hardware transcoding support of as many NAS as I could find and their respective levels of transcoding in a NAS Compare article. If it's not in the description, which I hope it is, hopefully it'll be in the next video for you. Which brings me down to the bottom with two more concepts: offline transcoding and one more after that. Offline transcoding isn't strictly something within Plex. This is something you can do on a NAS that a lot of people recommend, but when you hear offline transcoding, it's kind of, what? What does that even mean? Well, offline transcoding is when you get the NAS, you instruct the NAS to transcode things in advance. You ask the NAS, do me a favor, I want all this entire library to be in a smaller, more compact, more accessible version, so that when Plex asks for a file, you already have it ready. You're not going to try and encode it on the fly and use up all the system resources and create a big slowdown. What you're going to do is and you know, that buffering, it takes the file and already has a pre-prepared miniaturized version ready in advance. And that can be very, very useful, but it takes a lot of system resources and you will end up with 2 copies of every single file. It can make things easier in the long run, and if you have a NAS that has a transcoding engine that can't be accessed by Plex, this can be something you can do, and it's something a lot of a weaker QNAP NASs with Realtek CPUs I recommend highly. You will have to use more space to keep your copies of files, but as long as you get it down to a file type you know you're going to access a lot, and then you ask Plex, please transcode this 1080p file to 360p, and you have that 360p transcoding done, it will use that file instead, which can be very useful, but it does require a lot of setup. Another Plex terminology that people hear quite a lot: metadata and scraping. Now, this is how Plex is different from almost every other NAS-based media playing software, because what it does is it scrapes, so it accesses websites like IMDb and stuff like that and other media resources and gets trailers, descriptions, reviews, other recommendations, actors and more, as well as the images of box art, scrapes them all and then it stores it as metadata. This metadata is then applied to all the results on Plex, meaning that your library that you only had like a copy of Short Circuit 2 from the early 90s and you've just got Short Circuit _2_ or .wmv, some old file, once you put it on your Plex media server, it will identify the length, the name, and then it will, when you access it in Plex, it will have that great picture of Johnny 5. It'll have the description. I love that film. I love description and trailers and actors and everything. That is what it is. It is scraping these websites, which is included in a free Plex pass, and then applies that metadata to those files. And the last thing, of course, that I touched on there was buffering. And in its most basic form, buffering is when the data you're receiving from the Plex media server NAS is not keeping up with the playback of your file. You know, like when you're watching this video and there's a grey line and there's the playback one and the grey one jumps. Buffering is when this grey line falls behind the playback. And that's really it. These are the most common terms within Plex, and indeed a lot of media streaming in and outside of NAS. If you've got any questions, do let me know in the comments. Visit NAS Compares for completely free, impartial advice on the perfect Plex media server NAS for you. It's only manned by myself and one other guy, so sometimes a reply might take an extra day or so, but I will help you as best I can. Go to the free advice section on the right hand side of the website, but otherwise buy your NAS from the guys at span.com. Go to the links in the description below to all the different NAS Compare articles to find out more about all these different terminologies. And of course, if you've enjoyed this video, or once you've got your NAS, want to know what else you can do with it, click subscribe, like this video if you did, thank you very much, and click the bell to be notified about new videos as and when they become available. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.